Yup. Welcome back to the garden, another tour. It's like we're not doing another tour. Today I just want to talk to y'all about why I started gardening, and everything like that. So, this is the Offei-Addo project. This is Farmer Tim speaking, and welcome back to the garden. We're going to talk a little bit about why I started gardening, how I got into it. Maybe touch a little bit on cost of stuff, even though I don't really... I'll do that really. I'll talk about like starting your own garden and how much it could take for a small garden, like in a video, in another separate video. I'm looking for something right now while I talk to y'all. But for this one, I just kind of want to talk about how I got into it, what started me, etc. Yada 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 yada. Alright. So I farm, right? Oh, damn, I thought I found it. I farm, right? I'm looking for a tool, and I do this thing where I forget where I place my tools. It'd be a great idea for me to just be like, bet, let me put everything in one place. We'll keep it all there. Perfect world. I'm not perfect. Next. So, I farm. Or in theory, I try to. And that, like... I never really talked about it, but when I was in college, like a lot of people on here from Amherst, and like they're watching it, and they're like, "Where? Like we didn't know you did this." I didn't really talk about it in college, Like I was very quiet about it. I was like an academic. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to study, get my books, etc. But yeah, I've been doing this my whole life. My parents are from Ghana, as I talked about last time, and my parents both grew up in not villages but towns, very rural areas of Ghana, and because of that, like they would go to the market, like an open air market. Some of you know Haymarket in Boston, or other markets like wherever you're from, and open air market, and that's where they buy their food. My dad often talks about how he would go to the farm, like have a machete in hand, go to the farm. Either to cut firewood, or let's say they're gonna go harvest cassava, yam, plantain, whatever. They're gonna go harvest food to make fufu or whatnot. And that's like their experience. That was his experience growing up. And also like with his mom, they would grow with my mom. They would grow onions and tomatoes in the backyard, or not the backyard, but like the garden they had right next to their compound. So that was his experience, and like. Growing up, my first experience gardening was when I was like 4 years old. We got some pots outside of our, like, it wasn't an apartment, but like I guess like 3-story house, but it wasn't. We weren't the only ones living there, and we were growing tomatoes. And I think we also had some strawberries too that my older brother Kwaku was growing, or that's what he loved. And it was just like that was what it was. Like I was 4. We had tomatoes. That's my earliest memory. Then we moved here. That was like, what, 20 years ago, 19 years ago now? And we moved here to the Boondocks, Billerica, the Boondocks. And, like we had a garden that was tiny. Like, when I tell you tiny, I mean, this joint was like 10 by 10. So we, like 10 by 10 feet, and like that's 100 square feet, sure, but that's small. In terms of like what it was like, and back then they only had like herbs in the garden. The original owners, they had herbs in the garden. So I'm trying to get the light so y'all can see my face. See my, all right, this is better. All right, so they had herbs in the garden, and that was cool. Like that's what those people did. And we were like, herbs are cool, but we also want to grow actual food. Because herbs are not food to me. They're like good, but they're not like, they don't comprise a meal. So we were like, let's grow actual food. So that food meant for us tomatoes, eggplants, we'll try some corn because, corn is cool. Okra as people in America call it, and stuff like that. So that was like that was what we started with. So like I started doing that. That was what? We moved here 2003. The garden was like back in that corner over there. The far corner, that was it. Small, tiny. And we like have since expanded it. This is 2020. This year, like this spring during quarantine, I expanded it. I doubled the size of the garden and built the fence because I had time, like everybody. So I was like, let me do something. So yeah, I've been gardening for a minute and a half, and the reasons why are really like along the lines of like my parents and I, like it's a particular food system that they grew up in Ghana within, and then they kind of gifted that to me and my siblings. I was the only one of my siblings who really caught on to like, hey, let me actually learn what it means to like garden, how to build soil through like sustainable practices, etc. And whatnot. But like we all benefit from it. Like my mom will be making soup and she's using the tomatoes from the garden with onions and eggplants and stuff like that, you know. These are just the things that like we do. So it was like very normal to me that this was my lifestyle. It wasn't like a, oh word, like I'm gardening and this is like really new to me. Like I it's in my blood almost. You know, not almost, it is. So like there's a lot of privilege that goes with that, because the ability to farm means that you have peace around you, right? That you're able to stay in one spot and to just enjoy like peace. Like no one's coming to like mess with you. You're chilling. And that's like that's so much privilege in that. Like I was able to have like a stable environment where I was able to like kind of hone my skills of gardening, and farming and whatnot. And so that's kind of like where I'm at today. Like that, like, hey, let me go ahead. Oh, this is actually big as well. So yeah, my dad like taught me like the basics of like, you know, like how to plant plants, etc. But then from like time I was 6, 7, like I would be on, or like 8 really, I would be on like Google, on YouTube, watching videos, reading about articles like, yo, like how do you plant garlic? Because we never planted garlic before. My dad had never planted garlic before in Ghana. So we learned how to do that via YouTube, via Google. I just Googled, read like 20 different articles. Never really taken one article for like, this is the gospel truth. But then thinking like, oh word, let me like, this article says that, you know, you want to plant it in late September. This article says late October. This article says like November. Okay, what is appropriate for where I live in terms of like the weather that I have? This article says that you want to put down like 4 inches of mulch. This article says remove the mulch in the spring. This article says that you want to make sure that you don't stop water in 2 weeks before you harvest it, etc. You want to make sure that the earth is dry. And you know, so like you just learn a bunch of stuff about like, this is what you do when you garden, right? Like this is like from different crops. That's with garlic. Garlic was very easy for us to learn how to grow. Onions were not. We struggled with onions for a minute and a half, yo. Like that first year that we grew onions successfully, good Lord have mercy. That was a beautiful year, because like I remember like looking at my dad looking at me, and we were like, oh boy, this is lit. Like we know how to grow our own onions now. We don't have to go to the store no more, because the onions they be selling in the store, y'all, let me talk to y'all about variety real quick. Bruh, they be selling you them cooking onions and then sweet Vidalia onions, and then you get like one variety of red onions, right? But let me tell you something about variety. There are millions of onions out there, different varieties, different types of stuff that you can grow. But when you don't have the opportunity to learn, or to the privilege, I should say, the privilege to be able to grow your own food, to be able to say, oh word, I want a onion that is tart, and let me look up the variety, because I know those tart onions are going to be good for this particular recipe I want to grow, or like more acidic, I should say, not tart, acidic. When you don't have that that privilege, like you're losing on a lot of like biodiversity, a lot of taste, a lot of like just the traditional ways that you cook as a family. All those things that your ancestors did before you, you don't have the opportunity to keep alive, to recreate, to gift to the next generation, etc. Right? So, like, all that stuff right there. Like I looked at my dad. This was 10 years ago, or whatever it was. Maybe not 10 years ago, but like 7 years ago. Same difference. And I was like, oh word, we lit. Like this is a move right here. Like, so it's been a move. Growing onions, been a move. Like we're able to, you know, have our onions till March, and we can decide which ones we want to grow. Like which onions are good for our environment. Like some people like sweet onions, and those are great. But let me tell you something about sweet onions. The reason why we do not grow them, they don't store well. They store for like 2 months, and that's because sweet onions have a higher water content. And water means that there's a possibility of mold, which mold, detritivores, that means it's gonna, rot. We grow copra, one of the varieties of copra doesn't have, is a very like acidic one. It's gonna make you cry. Yo, you can be weeping. You can be weeping. You might be happy because you got your own onions, but you can be crying because those joints, they're different. So that's a great onion though for storage. Why? Because it has less water content. It has less water content. That means that it's gonna store longer. Like there's less chance that you're gonna have mold or other fungal diseases, rot, etc. That's beautiful. You can select that when you're going to buy seeds or you're going to get the plants from whatever company you're buying it from. That's all like stuff that you think about, right? That you have the privilege to think about because you have the ability to farm on like a small scale, a homestead scale or whatever. And that's awesome. So the reason I got into it is because of family history. Gardening's in my blood, for real. Like that's just what they do in Ghana. Like I remember going to Ghana, whether it was like early when I was like 6 or recently when I was doing research for some papers that I was writing for my thesis in college, like, and I was studying agriculture for stuff that I was doing in college, agricultural development. And going there, like, that was like what I would do. Like with my uncle, you know, like one day, like we went to an opera. He's a pastor, the Presbyterian minister. He took me to an opera where his son was singing in the Harmonious Chorale in Ghana, in Accra. And the next day, we was in the bush. Like I was at an opera in a crowd the next day, a really modern event. Next day, I was in a bush with 10-foot tall grass and holding a machete. That was for me, like, because I didn't grow up there, that was a lot. Because I was like, I'm in the bush right now with a machete, hacking through grass so I can go harvest the food I'm going to eat tonight. And that night, we had, we had fufu. Or the next day, actually, because that night we got back late. But that joint, that hit. Because we knew where that food came from. We harvested that food. And it was like, it was right there. And so it's in my blood. Like that's how people back in Ghana, like my family lives that exact way. And there's a privilege associated with that as well, because there's a privilege for my family associated with that because we have the ability to farm, and it's not something out of necessity, a desperation. Whereas a lot of people in the world, you know, if they're farming, it's because they're doing it subsistence farming, which is like you have to grow your food in order to what you eat, and also so you can go to market to get money to be able to pay for your children's clothing or send them to school, etc., stuff like that. You know, so my backyard farming is like a position of privilege because, like, you know, I have the land to do it. I have the ability to do it, but I'm not relying upon it in that way. Like if we needed to, we can hop in the car real quick, go to Market Basket or whatever stop shop you have, you know, and buy that food real quick. But not everybody lives like that. And so, you know, that's kind of like the root. Like, you know, I've talked a lot about privilege, a lot about like why I started farming, and like I don't know, like I'm just trying to figure out how I fit into, you know, how I fit all of this into like the next move that I make in my life, because I don't want to be in the boondocks forever, you know, farming, because this is cool, this is great, but the thing about farming, the thing about it brings a community around you, and yo, like the community aspect of farming is probably the best part, because you can talk about food and you can sit there and you like bet, like, we harvested this cabbage today, like let's go inside, let's make some stir fry, let's do whatever we're gonna do with the cabbage right now, real quick. And you can tell stories about where that food's come from, and then that person will also have stories about like when they were a kid, like how that food impacted them because like how their grandma made it, and their grandma would have stories that they told to that person about like what that food meant to them, right? So that's like the culture, the community part of food and farming is what really interests me. It's like what really keeps me going. And so and that's how I really started into it, because I know I have all these technical skills that are great and awesome about how to farm, and I can teach a lot of people like, yo, all right, you need to make sure you have your NPK right, your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels right in the soil. Your pH levels in the soil, that stuff all matters. How do you build soil fertility? That's all about the life that's in the soil. It's not only the nutrients, it's also the life that you got going on. You want to have fungi that are going on in the soil. You want to have different detritivores, bacteria, etc. And how do you promote all of that type of life, etc. The different like cover crops, the different things that are sustainable. I'm tossing a whole lot at you, and you might not know what these things are, but you I'll talk about all that at various points during the channel. These are all things that I do in my garden. These are things that be very beneficial to helping like using agriculture as a tool to mitigate the impacts of climate change. These are all like things that are kind of in the tenets of sustainable agriculture or regenerative agriculture, you know? So, or if you don't know, like I'm telling you, and we can talk about it. But yeah, so, you know, I started farming because it's in my blood. It's who I am. Yeah, that ain't really, not much more. Totally, like, you know, if you have questions, once again, hit me up, let me know. I'm always down to talk about it. You know, I gotta go work with some plant. Oh, let me tell you about this plant real quick, because I did not tell you about this plant during the June garden tour. This is another leafy green, a cut and come again green. This is another example of, so our spinach, it grows early in the season, right? In cool weather. It does not do well in hot weather. It'll go to flower immediately. But we grow a different type of spinach, or a different type of like plant that's similar to spinach, that will allow us to have leafy greens in the middle of the summer, right? That was my goal for this year. How can I extend the crop, the type of crop that we can have during the hot months from the cold months? Because we can't grow everything the same during the year, and that's not how plants work, not how God made them. So we have our komatsuna that I talked about last time. But then also another crop I didn't talk about is this right here. So this joint, this is what we call Malabar spinach. And it's supposed to grow up, and it's supposed to climb on the fence. And we'll see what happens with it. I have no idea whether or not it's gonna work. Once again, I've never planted it. You know, I'm experimenting with everything I'm doing here. So we'll see what's up with that. So like, I'm working on that right now. I gotta dig around the plants a little bit. We've been struggling with water in them because of their location. So I'm just trying to help the soil fertility. Then I'll mulch them with either some hay or some horse manure that we got from a local farm in town, or like, then it's not farm, but like they have horses there. So I'll put some of that on it for nutrients and fertility, and also help with the soil, building up the soil. And yeah, I also got to do some like tomato stuff, pruning these tomatoes right here. This is a trellis that we'll be using. We're using ropes. We'll tie up and we'll tie the tomatoes up. So you got to do some of that. Yeah, things are live here in the garden, you know, like they're literally alive, but they're live, you know, like we move them. Yeah, every single day an adventure up in here. So I don't know how to end this. I'm ending it now, actually. So yeah, this has been real. Enjoy yourself. I'll see you when I see you. I gotta get a catchphrase, you know, to say at the end of these. Belief in Fatherhood. I don't know if you guys probably don't watch him. Some of you do, but he has this catchphrase. I think it's protect your life, keep your network popping. That's his catchphrase, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's so black, boy. It's black and it's beautiful. That's his though. I can't steal that. So I gotta come up with something. I'll think of something as well, you know, something related to the garden, but something that's like more about culture and community as well. I think that's a really important thing about food and how we produce food. Capitalism has taken a lot of that out of it, you know. You know, like it streamlined food, making it Wonder Bread style, and that's not fun. That's not enjoyable. That's not us. So yeah, I'll come up with something. All right, y'all. Stay blessed. See y'all later. Later.